Hey everyone, welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back in the saddle once again for another season. And I have with me comic creator David Whalen from Correct Handed Comics. Hopefully, I'm holding up the correct hand. I don't know if I am yet, but I think you've been on my show 5 times, if not 6. So welcome back.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me back on. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy our conversations, and I feel lucky to have someone that will have me back as many times as you have, and I really appreciate it.
No, I'm happy that you're here. Obviously, I like having you as a guest, and you got a lot of stuff going on in comics.
Mm-hmm.
You always have a lot of stuff going on in comics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's two big things that sort of are going on with you that I want to talk about in the last few months at the very least. And the first one I kind of want to dive into is the Offspring, because issue 25 came out. Anytime anybody does something of 25 or more, it's kind of a big deal. But what is the Offspring? The short premise of it before we kind of get into issue 25 for those who are hearing about it for the first time.
Yeah, The Offspring is about, it starts off as three 20-something young adults who have been abused physically and mentally throughout their lives. They meet up at a alternative school, an orphanage, and realize that they are not only linked because of their shared trauma in their past, but also linked by having each of them have special abilities. So they become very close and realizing that they're not only linked by their past and their special abilities, but they also start to realize that they're kind of magnets for monsters and demons and trouble. It's for a specific reason that these monsters and demons and trouble are kind of gravitate towards them. With issue 23, I kind of have one of my big storylines from season 1 and season 2 kind of come to a close. There's a missing fourth member of their little clique that they kind of knew about. I sprinkle in little hints that there's a fourth member to their team that is lost. So issues 23, 24, 25 talk about this lost member of their group, and how she is linked to them also by their shared past traumas, by the special powers that they have, and by the fact that she is also a magnet for monsters and trouble. So issue 23, 24, 25 is what I call the Lightning Crashes trilogy, and it kind of goes back to be able to I often do flashbacks with my four main characters to kind of get to know a little bit about what they had to deal with as children. So we start off with this fourth character, Megan, and how she became orphaned, and how she developed her powers through the trauma that she had to go through. All four of the characters, their powers that they have were kind of kickstarted by their trauma and abuse that they had to go through in their childhood. So 23, 24, 25 kind of bring her story into light and show how she's connected to these other three characters, what she's been doing while these other three characters were connecting with each other, where she's been, and how she got kind of lost and separated from the other three. And it ends at issue 25. I don't want to tell you how it ends, but they start to jump through time to be able to find how they're connected to each other. They realize they're connected to each other through time also. So they in a couple last issues, they jump to the American Civil War. They jump to the 1960s and battle the main villain named the Eternity Man, who turns out is the Zodiac Killer. And he's killing for a very specific reason that I don't want to get into. I want people to read it.
So let's actually talk about this, because the way I view it, and stop me at any point if I'm wrong, is the first few issues of The Offspring, we get to know these characters. We kind of get to know their morality. We get to know what they do, what they believe in, what they don't believe in, and also kind of what their powers are and some consequences that ensue. And then really at the start of, issue 13, I feel we start diving into the bigger realm of this.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, the first, few issues are sort of the prequel. We're getting to know these characters. And then we really get to dive into the main story And then obviously they're jumping now through time and everything is connected. And there's a reason why
Mm-hmm.
they're able to jump through time. And that this might not be the first time that somehow these people have been engaged in some type of
Mm-hmm.
quest is a good word to use. I like to
Sure.
use.
Yeah.
And reincarnation might be a good word to use as well
Mm-hmm.
in this
Mm-hmm.
sense. And if
Yeah.
anybody knows me, I love that word for a very interesting person. I'll mention the name Tezuka. But yeah, what is that like? Because now everything is sort of fitting in, where all the gears are now starting to churn a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, you got it. The first four issues are very much introducing these characters, who they are, their different personality quirks. They're not heroes. They're not in a good place. They're very troubled, and they show it, and they in their actions, and not only how their actions with the rest of the world, but with each other also. They're not when they meet up again in their 20s. They're not friends. They're struggling in life, and that was something that I really wanted to start off at their lowest point, for readers to be able to know, why they're there and where they came from. So the flashbacks give you a little bit of their trauma and where they're mentally are as they grow up. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I sprinkle in some of the bigger epic stuff throughout the first season of issues 1 through 13. And then, like you said, issues 11, 12, and 13, it really does start to take it to the next level. They are transported by these godlike creatures called the In Us All, and they are the living embodiment of human emotion. So the In Us All, they are the heart in us all, the fight in us all, the child in us all, the wisdom in us all, and there's a main villain, I guess you'd call it, main antagonist, the malice in us all, who is kind of manipulating and forcing these characters into these situations, and they are transported to their magical realm called the Leeway, where they finally start to understand these little hints and these flashes and dreamlike feelings of this fourth member, Megan, and how to be able to find her, and to rescue her from the character, the Eternity Man, who has kidnapped her.
Yeah, and then even going further into this too, because now obviously we've dealt with these three characters. They've gone through some crazy stuff
Hmm.
going back into the Civil War time. One of them
Hmm.
almost losing his mind, I believe,
Hmm.
is a good way to put it.
Sure.
And then rescuing him, and then jumping to the 1960s,
Hmm.
and now jumping back, and now they're also like halfway across the country, I think,
Hmm.
as well. Because I think they started on the East Coast, if I'm not mistaken.
They did. They had to do a little road trip to get to where Megan was in their time. So a good portion of the second season is the three main characters road tripping across the United States, and again being a magnet for these monsters and these problems. The hijinks ensue, as they say. So it's a struggle for them just to get from state to state, because they're constantly being stopped or manipulated or attacked by these weird things. And it's been a fun trip to be able to not only come up with cool monsters, use mythology that people know, but also come up with new stuff to be able to kind of highlight each character's mental state, to kind of highlight their struggle, and use the monsters as kind of a metaphor for where these characters are and how they're trying to move forward, and be able to kind of um, not ever really get over their past, because for me the goal is not for them to be shiny happy people getting over their shared trauma. It's about how they deal with it, not the overall, oh, I'm okay now, I'm a perfect person, because that's never going to happen. So it's about how they deal with this trauma, and how they interact with each other, to realize that they're kind of sharing the same fate. So to be able to have them fight monsters that will force them to ponder their problems has been really fun.
Yeah, and then obviously there's that going on and the
Mm,
whole monster stuff, and then them dealing with all these enemies, and
mm,
obviously they're now dealing with Dr. Odyssey as well
mm,
in certain ways.
mm,
And then they're also now realizing that they're rescuing their friend, and they might not exactly know their friend as they once knew her as well. And that whole mission, and even what is that like, because there's been a bunch of stuff that has led to this. There's been a bunch of consequences that have led to this, and there's been a bunch of decisions that have both been somewhat good and somewhat bad, that might be why a bunch of stuff has happened and why Megan might have been lost the first time.
Yeah, with each of the characters, I try to have them very conscious of how they approach their coping with their issues, right? One of them tries to put on, like Will, one of the main characters. When we first meet him, he's the one that looks like he's got it all together. He's the big guy, he's the strong man of the group, but he's also the smartest person you'll ever meet. So when we first meet him in issue 1, he's working at the alternative school, the orphanage where they grew up. So he stayed put, and he is using his past and his knowledge to be able to help kids that are like him. None of the other kids have powers, but they are going through their own trauma. So he stayed to be able to help the owner of the alternative school to be able to help these kids through their trauma. And he looks like he's got it together. But as the series runs on, issues 5, 6, 7, 8, we start to see the cracks. How I like to use the phrase, he's a duck on the pond. On the top of the water, everything just looks like smooth sailing for the duck. Underneath the water, it's a crazy mess of feet flying everywhere. So how these characters deal with their trauma is something they all deal with it very different ways. Vince can't often handle the immense pressure of what he's dealing with, so he lashes out in humor, often inappropriate ways. Sarah shuts down completely. And these are all things that don't really help them in their ability to be able to push past these things that they're going through. Megan ran. So when she had her trauma, she met the kids at a very young age. 9, 10 is when she met the 3 main characters that we start the series with in the alternative school. And then she ran away and she was forgotten about. So from issue 23, 24, 25, it's her journey of where she started in the alternative school after running away. And then her trek kind of going through the United States, trying to find a place for herself. She eventually does after many, many mishaps. And it turns out being the running was the catalyst for the big overall problem with Dr. Odyssey, who is the Eternity Man, to be able to kidnap him and capture her and use her powers to be able to, I like to say, pillage and plunder through time. And there's a big reveal about what his overall scheme is, his overall plan is, coming up in issue 25. But I wanted to get the characters together, and the fun thing about it was Megan doesn't know these kids, the 3 main characters, Will, Vince, and Sarah. Megan doesn't know them as adults. So I try to come at it as a way of, is Megan going to even know who these 3 people are when they come? Hey, we know you. We're linked all together. We're psychically and linked together with this trauma. And she's going to go, I don't know who you are. Who are you people? And then finally starting to remember her meeting with them at the alternative school, and being able to remember psychically reaching out to them when they were in the leeway, to be able to even know that she was in trouble.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
So to even go further into this and go even a little bit more, I guess, technical to some degree, obviously this is 25 issues in. And I know that when you do, and I mentioned that at the start of this, anytime you do anything of 25 consecutively, it's kind of a big deal. And I think in comics, it's a big deal. And, what is that like for you? Because now you have a block of work. You actually have a very much a complete story, or a good chunk of a story, and you're in the heart of the middle of the story.
Yeah.
And what is that like? Because it is a big difference when you do have 25 issues out, and now you're in the heart of the story versus when you're on issue 1.
Yeah, quite frankly, it's a dream come true. I oftentimes sit there, and when I'm plotting it out or doing pages or coloring or lettering or whatever, I'm thinking back to the 15-year-old who many years ago who came up with this overall concept of these characters, and how to be able to weave different genres in and out of these characters, and what I wanted to, the story I wanted to tell with these characters so many years ago, and to be able to have it actually become a reality. I quite honestly, I never knew if it was actually going to happen or not. So I have scheduled 54 issues. The last 4 issues is the final 4-issue story arc that brings it all together. I know what the last page is going to be. I know where these guys are going to end up. I know what's going to happen. And I think that when you see each individual story pushes the main story along, but each individual story helps each of these characters on their journey to be able to move forward in their lives. Really, the main overall theme is, how do we deal with the things that happen in our life every day? Now, these guys are dealing with some big time stuff that most of us don't deal with, but the idea of abuse, the idea of trauma, the idea of the monster under the bed is something that's not new to a lot of people. That's not a big mystery to a lot of people. A lot of people deal with those things. So to be able to tell this overarching story with these now 4 main characters, I never thought I'd be able to get this far. And quite frankly, I'm having a lot of fun. I can't be enjoying it more than I am. Because it's something that is in my brain, and then eventually getting out into the real world, which is amazing.
And let's even talk about this, because I think maybe 10 years ago, this would have been a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
Where we are in an indie market in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways. We are in a creative market collectively. We're creating something and pushing anything out there, whether you want to do it on webtoons,
Mm-hmm.
you want to do it on a physical book, you want to kickstart it, you want to just self-publish it.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier than it's ever been before. And obviously, you're just trekking along issue after issue after issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really interesting, because I know a lot of people who want to start something and then they don't continue.
Yeah.
I think that's why this is so fascinating, is that 25 issues in, I don't think people understand how hard it is to do 25 issues in a row. And not because you can't write it or you can't draw it,
Mm-hmm.
but to have the wherewithal to stand and
Yeah.
push out 3 or 4 issues and then do it again and again and again. I think it is a very complicated thing to do,
Yeah.
because there's so many things that could just wear you out.
Mm. Yeah, I see it all the time where, we've talked about this before. I don't Kickstart, I don't Indiegogo. I'm a one-man band. I just put out the books. I think that very early on, I realized that my bread and butter wasn't going to be the individual issues, even though that's what I'm working on. My bread and butter is going to be the trades. And that's really what I sell the most of. I love being able to have them as individual issues, to be able to have each part of a story with different covers, with each character being able to shine on some level in each of the individual issues. But to be able to have these issues collected in trades, I am working on actually issue 23, 24, 25 is going to be volume 6 of the Offspring, and then I'm able to put season 2 in an omnibus, a volume 2 omnibus, by the end of the summer here. So really what I've noticed as an indie creator is the people who are working in a team, and I've worked in teams before, and I love working with other people on other books, and I've done it with some of my one-shot books and some of my 4-issue miniseries and things like that. But being able to do it all as me, and being able to know where I'm going without a whole bunch of competing ideas trying to get in there, has really been the reason that I've been able to just get these books out in a timely manner. And I think that the biggest problem people have is building up the capital to be able to pay all these people to be able to do it. I don't have to do that. I just put out books. Yeah, I just put out cool books.
So there's 2 things I want to talk about,
Yeah.
actually. So the first thing, and I'm very curious about this, is that I think in a lot of ways Kickstarter is limiting people, where I think it is a way how to get capital,
Hmm.
but it's also a slowing down
It's
process.
very slow. It's a very slow process.
And I think that there's a few things. There's an ethical component to it, and I think that a lot of people are getting this, where people are running campaigns, but they're not. They're running campaign after campaign after campaign, but they're not giving me my book.
Yeah.
So I know people who do that, and I think that a lot of people are getting sick of that
Yeah.
in the community. And I think it's actually going to be not a revolution, but I think it's going to be questioning. And
Yeah.
I think that's coming in the next 6 months, where people are like, I get that you're trying to be previews,
Hmm.
but not you, not you
Yeah.
personally, but whatever you as in collective,
Yeah.
everybody. But I think that's going to be a very interesting discussion. But
Hmm.
also, it is a very slow process, because if you're
Hmm.
running a 30-day campaign and you fund on day one and you made most of your money on day one, you have to wait the other 29 days. And
Yeah.
I mean, you have the money coming, but you still have to wait 29 more days, and you
Hmm.
still have to wait 2 weeks after for your money to clear.
Hmm.
So it's very slow, I find, and I want content today.
Yeah,
And I think
that's one of my selling points, I think, is in something that I've really been starting to advertise more, is you don't have to give me money to make the books. I've made the books, buy the books, and that's how I get the money to be able to continue to make more books. And I think that, while I'm like sometimes I feel like I'm shouting into the wind. I think people are starting to see, that, yeah, just if you want to read cool comics, buy the book, and you'll have it. You'll just have the book. And there are a lot of times where people will message me and say, "Hey, I really liked it, but I don't know about a long story with independent comic books. How do I know that you'll be there for 54 issues? I will be there for if I like lost both my arms, I would
that's
learn how to draw with my toes.
this is
I
why
will be there.
issue 25 is so
Yeah.
interesting, is that when you go to a con, and I haven't been to a con in a while and I don't have a book,
Mhm.
but I'm a strong believer that on an interview level, if I have 100 interviews, I'm taken more seriously than if I have
Mhm.
3,
Yeah.
because I've been there longer. I've been doing this for 10 years. I like to believe that I'm taken a little bit more seriously
Hmm.
when I approach somebody versus somebody who hasn't done one interview. And I would imagine that when you have 10 issues out at your table,
Hmm.
and you have an arc, or you have all season 2 at your table, or you have an
Hmm.
omnibus, so it's like, okay, this person actually has content,
Hmm.
and they're actually here for the long run, and they have a track record,
Yeah.
at least with the Offspring. And obviously you have some other stuff that you've done, but I would imagine it adds a level of legitimacy to you, because it makes me feel more comfortable when somebody has 6 issues done. Like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, by the way, issue 7 is coming out next month on so and so.
Hmm.
Because I
Yeah.
hate to say this, but if I back one issue on Kickstarter, I don't know if that person's going to be here for life.
Yeah.
And that's an issue, because if you have 6 issues planned, well, stuff happens.
Yeah, and I've seen so many people who struggle to get issue 1 or even 2 out, and then they do eventually within a span of a year, or maybe it's 2 years. They've gotten 2 issues out, and they're planning even something like a 12 issue maxi series, but they can't. I mean, who's going to wait 12 years to read 12 issues of comics? Maybe somebody
Or,
would.
or, or it goes
Um,
the other way
yeah.
sometimes, where somebody says, I have 12 issues,
Hmm.
and they struggle on issue 1. Issue 1 doesn't have the outing
Hmm.
on, its first round. And then they reshoot it, does okay, it barely makes it
Yeah.
across the line.
Yeah.
And then issue 2 doesn't make it barely across the line. And
Hmm.
they say, look, I got a third issue left. And now they've taken their series from 12 issues that they had planned,
Hmm.
and they've brought it down to 3. And I'm like, but your concept's great.
Hmm.
Your concept is brilliant for whatever reason, but you now just cut 9 issues out
Yeah.
because for whatever reason. And I think it's a real problem, because now I'm invested in your project, but
Hmm.
I was hoping you were going to have 6 issues of something, right? And now
Yeah.
you only are going to do 3 because the market has decided X.
Sometimes that can be a positive. Sometimes if a creator has to do that, you kind of need to trim the fat from, they have all this great character work and all this stuff and all this background things happening, and there's a B plot and a C plot and a D plot. And then they realize, oh, I'm not going to be able to get 12 issues done. So let's trim it down to 4. So they go in with the red marker and try to figure out what needs to go. That can be an interesting way to be able to really streamline it. I always, one of the things that I do also is, like I said, I know that ongoing series for an independent creator can be difficult, can be a hard pill to swallow sometimes for someone who's trying to jump on board. So what I did was I started my one-shot series. So I have different genres, different books, different characters. None of them are connected in any way. They're just 24-page, 23 to 25-page one-shots of different genres. So there's one that is aliens. There's another one that is very like thriller noir. There's one that is vampires. There's one that is superheroes. So I try with my one-shot series to be able to kind of give people a chance to be able to pick up a book to see if they like what I do, to see if they like my art style, to see if they like my writing style, and kind of use that as a bridge to be able to say, hey, if I like these two one-shots, maybe I'll give the Offspring a shot. So they'll buy trade one, and hopefully that'll snowball into them buying all the trades, or maybe even buying the omnibus. So it's definitely the long game that I'm playing to be able to get these books out to people. But yeah, my table at a con is just full of all this content that's already been created. And a lot of people say, well, what if you're going through your book and you feel like you're going through issue 3 or the first trade with issues 1 through 4, and you're going through that book and you have a better idea? Do you go back and do you add that into issue 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever it is? And I always tell them I can't go backwards. I've got to keep moving forward. So even there'll be times where I wake up and go, oh my gosh, that would have been awesome in issue 10 if I would have had the character say that thing. But I'm not gonna go back and edit it for one great line, you know what I mean, or add in a page for one scene that I didn't have in there originally. So I think that's another problem that a lot of people have is they're continuously in an editing process rather than get it out, get those pages done, and then if you need to adjust here and there, take a week, adjust, look at it, read it, adjust what you need to adjust, and then get it out. I think that the biggest thing that holds people back is that fear of, what if nobody likes it? What if I'm rejected? What if I stink? What if I this or whatever? Okay. But I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to get cool books out that I like.
So, and then the other thing you mentioned that I think is really interesting too is that you know what you're good at, or you figured out what your bread and butter is. So obviously I've discovered that in my own, YouTube podcasting realm, where I discover what's working, what's not. And oddly enough, it's fascinating, and I'm realizing what actually is going to get views and what isn't. And so what is that like too? Same thing in my eBay business, is that I have a pretty good idea what works and what doesn't. And I'm figuring out my niche. And so what is that like? Because I think that's also a massive problem right now in comics, is that what is the thing that makes you money? What is your area of specialty? What, I don't want to say problem you're solving, because I don't think anybody in comics creating a comic is solving any massive problem beyond entertainment, which is still a problem that needs to be solved because everybody wants to be entertained. But what area are you filling? And I think that's something that's fascinating, saying, I know I'm going to make money on the trades. And so you just need to produce the content. And if you produce a floppy, well, somebody who doesn't want to wait, 4 or 5 months for the trade, they'll pick up the floppy, or they just want, they're a floppy collector. And there's also a different market for trade paperback collectors. And so what is that like? Because I think that's also a big problem. I think it's interesting when people start realizing, saying, hey, I know where the money is in my business.
Yeah, I think for me, I know that one of my biggest strengths is reliability in myself, to be able to know that I'm going to get it done in the time that I say I'm going to get it done. Reliability that I know I'm going to have good characterization. I know that these characters are going to make people laugh. The characters that are supposed to be making jokes are making jokes. The ones that are supposed to be the heart of it, that hold the stories together, are there. I know the monsters look cool. So for me, it really is about, like you said, you were talking about how it's not really solving problems. For a lot of times, what I will try to do is I will take a look at a story and say, what are my strengths in this story? What do I know that I can do well to make this entertaining? And then I'll plot it out. And then I'll say, how can I plus it? What can I do that people won't think that I'm going to do, who have read issues 1 through 10? What's going to turn it on its head? What's going to help the story move forward in a common sense way, but also surprise people? So I think that through this process, it very much is a process of me trying to be the best that I can be, but also challenge myself to be able to not just do the same thing over and over and over again. There was a rock band that everybody knows from the 80s, and I won't name names because I'm not going to badmouth people because creating stuff's hard. But there was a rock band from the 80s who it was like, early 2000s, and their popularity was waning, but they were still going on tours and all this kind of stuff. And I saw an interview of the main guy, the lead singer, and he said, we're never going to make an album that's different than what we've made in the past because we know what our audience wants. And to me, on a business standpoint, I 100% understand that. You know what sells. You want to make your money. You want to make sure that you can pay your insurance on your Ferrari or whatever it is, right? But as an artist, that shows me a lack of wanting to grow as an artist, right? Wanting to be better and wanting to challenge yourself. Not that I'm saying that I'm better or anything than this big band of the 80s. But to me, the whole point is to not only know what my strengths are, but to be able to challenge myself, to be able to grow more strengths, to be able to have more things that I'm good at. I think that one of the things, and I'll give you an example. When I started this, lettering's hard. Lettering is a hard part of it. Is like the process of lettering can help or hurt the storytelling in a comic book. Like, and anybody that has ever done anything in comics will tell you the same thing. And I could feel myself struggling. So what I did is I went online, talked to as many people as I could that I knew in the business that had done this before. And I just worked it to the bone until that I felt my lettering had gotten to a point where, they say that good lettering is lettering you don't notice because you're just enthralled in the story. To the point where I think my lettering is clean. It looks good. It tells the story. It helps people through the page. It is everything that I would want from a comic book, from one of the big boys, from the lettering and sound effects and all those things. So that's an example of me going, I could hire a letterer, or I could be the guy. I could get myself to that point. And I it's always, how can I plus it up? How can I make it better? But I think I'm getting there pretty quickly.
That's interesting.
That sounded egotistical. I didn't mean it to be. I'm sorry.
Wait, what'd you say?
That sounded egotistical. I didn't mean it to be. I'm sorry.
It's totally fine. It's totally fine. I purposely table my ego, purposely. But some people just don't get it. Mm-hmm. It's all right. It's all right. Everybody who doesn't get it, they don't watch the show anyway, so it's all right. In fact, they blocked me on Facebook. Oh, no. Enough. But it's their loss, not mine. Mm-hmm. But that's all right. That's all right. I take the Michael Jordan approach. When he says I want to wear shorts at a country club, and like, Mr. Jordan, you need to wear pants. It's like, it's all right. I don't want to join your club anyway.
Yeah. I always say, what I say is that there are a lot of people out there that love Star Wars, but there are a lot of people out there that hate Star Wars. I'm going to do what I think is good, what I like, and hope that people jump on board.
What isn't the saying is that you can't please everybody?
Yeah.
And you only need to please really 1,000 people. Because if 1,000 people give you $10 a month, you now have a great business.
Yeah.
And that's all you need. And I forget who wrote it. There's a book, and I forget who wrote the book, but it's one of the best books that I've read pieces of. I haven't read the whole thing. But I understand the basic thesis of it is that if you have 1,000 people paying you $10 a month, you have a great business. And that's what, $120,000 business a year. I mean, that's a great business.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. I think it's a problem in comics is that people don't necessarily understand the business of comics. I think there's a lot of creators who understand creativity. I just think they don't get the business side of it. And I come from the business side of comics, selling comics and engaging in that. And I don't come from creativity. And I think it's a real problem.
Yeah.
I think that's why we're having problems in Kickstarter right now. And I'm very curious how you feel, because I know a bunch of creators who are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I know a bunch of creators who are doing okay,
Mm-hmm.
and I know a bunch who are doing great, but it's a very weird time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my theories on it, but I'm curious what yours are.
Yeah, I think, like you said in the beginning, this is one of the times where doing what we do has never been, I was about to say easier, but that's not really the right word, is it has never been
More accessible.
more accessible. That's exactly the
That's the
phrase.
word we're looking
Yeah,
for.
more accessible. Because someone like me sitting, in a podunk town in upstate New York, where it's I make the joke it's a one horse town and the horse died 10 years ago, could sit here and create 25 pages of an ongoing series, could create these things and get it out online, and still feel a part of the community, still feel a part of a group of people that are
And
doing the
look
same
at
thing.
me. I'm
I make the
cool.
joke, I say it all the time. There are 1,000 of me. There are a million of me, of people who have the same kind of ability, same kind of creativity. I like to think, I like to hope that my drive is the thing that sets me apart. The thing that says it's I'm not worried about perfection in every line. I'm worried about making sure I put out the best product I can, but I can't put out product or content if I don't make the content. So I have to make sure that I continue moving forward. And I think that's one of the things. I know a guy, and again I won't name names. He is a great artist, and he can't take the leap of sequential pages to finish a book. And I keep telling him, you just got to do it. You just got to do it. Put your, like we just said, set your ego to the side. Just don't worry about it being in the Louvre, in 10 years. Worry about telling a cohesive story that is 23 pages long and get it out and see what happens. And then do it again. And then do it again. And then do it again. And then do it
Yeah,
again.
see,
And then do it
I,
again.
I have a theory where
Uh-huh.
I think, and this is just my thoughts on why stories are not working and why even Kickstarter is not working, is that we're in the summer. So in the summer, there's more options
Mm-hmm.
for so much more entertainment where you can go on vacation. You can go out to an outdoor restaurant, an outdoor bar, and discretionary income, I think, in the summer typically goes down because there's more options and you have to earn my dollar. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of it. I think the economy is tightening up.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that there's a bunch of interesting projects right now out in comics,
Mm-hmm.
both self-published, crowdfunder, Fund My Indie, Fund
Mm-hmm.
My Comic, as well as Kickstarter, Indiegogo, you name it. There's a bunch of interesting things out there. And I also think that people might just be burned out. And I also think that people are saying, look, this is the same story from 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
both on the mainstream and the indie scene. And I
Mm-hmm.
also think people are getting burned out from variants. And so I think that's what's going on, where now it is a buyer's market. It is not a seller's market.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of it. And I'll be honest, most comic stories bore me.
Yeah.
They bore me and they're predictable. And it's a real issue where, after 2 issues of Batman right now, I can kind of predict where the arc is going.
Yeah.
And even on indie comics, there's a saying where a lot of creators need an editor
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have an editor. And that's also part of the issue. And then when it's $20 for your cover A on Kickstarter and your book's okay, I'm
Yeah.
not coming back for issue 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's also the issue too, where it's really expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I 100% agree with you with the editor thing. I have actually two great guys that I can kind of flip back and forth. I try to do like each storyline. If I have a major storyline, I have one guy that I go to who is amazing, and another guy for the next storyline to be able to make sure that they both kind of have a good idea of the story and be able to help me. Like, hey, this didn't really make any sense when you said this in issue, blah blah blah, panel, blah blah blah, and I'll go, oh, that you got it. Yes, you're absolutely right. I can clarify that a little bit more. I can make that joke. I can plus that joke up. I can make it more pithy. I can really drive home, the loneliness of this character. I can really whatever it is. So I 100% agree that someone in my position to be able to have somebody who not really knows comics, but knows storytelling. And I think that's another little issue there too, is that a lot of people, they go into comics and have only read comics. So going into any kind of storytelling, like if you want to be the next Steven Spielberg and tell great stories in movies, great, but you better read a lot of books. You better read a lot of comics. You better watch a lot of good TV. You better watch, or bad TV. You better watch a lot of good and bad movies. You better go to see a lot of plays. You better, whatever it is, to be able to really, hone in on what storytelling is. And I think that one of the biggest problems is a lot of creators you see, and again, I can't, and won't name any names, but that you can tell kind of when a creator has only read X-Men for their whole lives and have never read anything else, or never, never paid attention to anything else.
You can tell when a creator's getting lazy too, or
Mm-hmm.
even when a company has outpaced their character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll be very honest, and I got no problem naming names. And I think Zenoscope has outpaced Van Helsing.
Okay.
I really think that Van Helsing has had a rough few arcs lately, because I think that they made her fight the League of Monsters and then they made her fight it again, and it was just like, now where are we going with this? Like, they need to go and come up with a new, fresher concept, and maybe you got to bench a character for a season, because if all of a sudden she was gone for 6 issues and then she came back 6 months later and he came back with an idea that was similar but a little bit different, you just benched that character. And I think that's also something too that's an issue in comics, is that sometimes a character has too much spotlight. And I think that's a problem. And I don't mind saying, because I like Van Helsing, and I don't think the character is a problem. I just think that the character needs a fresh take, and maybe the character needs a break.
And that's really hard, because especially with a character like that, and I could give you another example too of that, but with a character like that, that's such a high concept that who hasn't, Van Helsing in whatever iteration hasn't fought this monster or done this thing, or whatever it is.
Money too. And that's the problem, is that Van Helsing and Robin Hood are Zenoscope's biggest sellers. And that's the problem, is that how do you bench a character? And you're a wrestling fan, so you'll appreciate this. I don't know if you remember Jericho. Back, so Chris Jericho and the Big Show were tag team partners.
Oh, Jericho, yes. I remember that.
And it was great, and it was the idea that, and for the longest time they didn't have merchandise. And Big Show was like, but we're the hottest tag team, and we're main eventing, and we're getting all this money, and we're getting all this heat. Why don't we have T-shirts? Why don't we have that merch? And Chris Jericho was saying, no, wait. Just wait till the right time. And he purposely kept delaying and not pushing for merch and asking for merch, and he kept declining, because when they got merch, it was the hottest merch in all of WWE for almost like 6 months. And those paychecks were far superior. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't know, because they built that story, that merch became very popular.
It's he does the same thing. He's great at like merchandising like that, and I've heard say that whenever he's a bad guy, doesn't sell merchandise at shows, because he thinks nobody should be buying the shirt of the bad guy. But when he flips 6 months later, his sales go through the roof, right? So that's awesome. But the other example I had too of that was The Walking Dead. So I, like many others, love the show from season 1, read all the comics, and loved comparing and contrasting between the comics and the show. But about season 9, it started to fall apart, right? So I have just been, it's been maybe 2 years since it's been on the air, maybe a year since it's been on the air. Season 10 and 11, I didn't even know the show had ended. So I'm on Netflix. I'm like, oh, let me give season 10 and 11 a shot. Season 10 started okay, and then I just got bored. It was just the same thing over and over and over again. And it's not a dig at the creators. Like I said, creating things is hard, but to be able to keep something like that going for 11 seasons was almost an impossible task. To be able to try to do something fresh and new with not only the concept, but with the characters. So I really do wish that maybe they should have done 8 seasons in a movie and called it a day, right? But that's easy for me to say when I'm not the CEO making millions of dollars a day off of this.
It's tough. It's tough. I mean, look, I love Yellowstone, but also like Yellowstone, and I watched season 2. I'm gonna probably watch season 3. the marathon's starting in a little bit for all weekend. It's gonna be great. But they run out of ideas and they let Beth just yell for 20 minutes, and it's great. It's great.
After
It's
season
great.
2, though, they've already run out of ideas. Oh no, that's not good.
And then they get back on track.
Okay.
Like they have 20 minutes to fill up. They just let Beth yell for like 20 minutes. It's great though because she's such a good actress and she's so brutal at it. But like you could tell in an episode when they're like, oh shit, we got nothing to do here. They just let her go on a tirade for 20 minutes. But the point I'm getting at is it is very hard to create. And I don't fault creative problems, but I'm like, maybe you shouldn't do that, or maybe you should have a 4-issue, not a 6-issue story. And I get that when there's real money involved and you have a contract with a publisher, why you need to fill in the void. But you also, I feel, hurt your brand. And it's so complicated, and it is what it is.
I can give you another example, and and these are the examples I give myself when I feel that I am struggling or falling down a rabbit hole of making sure that my idea is the best idea it can be. So Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show, not the movie, which the movie had good stuff also, but the TV show. So, a big bad for each season. And I think it was season maybe 5 or 6 where they brought in the military guys and they had the android, I believe his name was Adam, that was the big bad over the overarching season for that season. And it got a lot of heat. It got a lot of negative press. And looking back on it, it probably wasn't the strongest bad guy they've ever had. And it wasn't the strongest season they've ever had. But inside the season was solid storytelling and solid characterization. So even with a big bad that might not be the strongest, and that's one thing that I really took from that, is that you might have a hole, but what's going on around the hole? You know what I mean? What's happening inside of maybe that concept that's not so strong that'll help to elevate what you're doing. And for me, that's always a reminder of you can be on the top of your game, like Joss Whedon was a few years ago, and still trip yourself up and still make mistakes throughout the whole process. So if anybody was ever expecting mine to be perfect, they're in for a world of hurt. I mean, any creator, because no creator is gonna have it be perfection every single time.
I've had one perfect interview in almost 600 interviews that I've done. One.
It wasn't one of mine.
No, it was not. For whatever reason,
darn it,
it just connected. A and B connected.
Nice.
For whatever, and me in that interview was Brother Greatness from the Church of Greatness, great wrestler. Nice. And it just worked. Mm-hmm. It just worked. Every point just worked. Mm-hmm. And he met me wherever I was, and I met him, and it just worked.
Nice.
And I can't explain it, where it was completely by chance. But when an episode of any show is perfect, that sometimes is just pure luck. Mm-hmm. Where that actor was on point, mm-hmm. or a comic is perfect, or an issue is perfect, or a story arc was perfect. It was just luck on how that's what I think, because for that to work, I mean, let's look at, the most luckiest thing happened a few days ago with the Yankees. Mm-hmm. A perfect game. I mean, that was pure luck. There's an element of skill there, but it's a huge amount of luck too.
Yeah.
So that's where I go with this. But I think it's very interesting that you bring up Buffy season 5, because because I think there was more after that. I'm not a Buffy guy. Mm-hmm. So I'm not as familiar with Buffy as I am with some other stuff.
7 seasons, if I remember correctly. 7 full seasons of Buffy.
But even going into that too, I mean, I also think that sometimes people also criticize where you could have just a down season, but then you could have a great season following that, or the season before that was great too. And if you're getting even renewed for 4 or 5 seasons, I mean, I look at Law and Order SVU. Mm-hmm. There are bad seasons, but they've been renewed for 3 seasons, and there's been bad seasons of that show. Mm-hmm. And then the next season they come out swinging, and it's a great season.
Yeah.
And so I look at it on an overall arc of if there's 30 seasons of Law and Order SVU, and the overall arc from the start to the finish of it over 30 years was great. I mean, does it really matter that there was just a little dip in one season?
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, but you're 100% correct. Yeah.
But
And I think that the one other thing, for me as a creator, um, I think I look at something like the Flash that just came out, which clearly had a lot of problems. Too many chefs in the kitchen. Money just being thrown. Thinking
it
that
was just a
money,
fast movie.
yeah, that money was just gonna solve the problem, just throwing money at it and rewrite after rewrite and rewrite. I think that that clearly, somewhere along the line, somebody in charge should have said, stop. We are 3 years into this production and we are nowhere closer to having a finished movie. It was supposed to come out, like 6 years ago, and it just now came out. And I think they're just like, just put it out. So let's just go. Let's just put it out, see what happens. But I think that for me, that kind of stuff, again, helps me as a creator to say, okay, if they're throwing $350 million at it and can't get it right, why am I worried? Why am I putting all this pressure on myself to be able to make the perfect issue of this or that? I'm just going to put out a book that I'm proud of. And I think that's, for me, that's what I always try to remind myself. I think one of the biggest issues also with the community of comic books or fans or whatever you want to call it is that you have people who are creators who look at something like The Flash, which I have not seen yet. And and a lot of people, I think, like me, use it as an exercise of what would I have done? Where would I have filled that plot hole? Where would I have changed that story? Where would I have maybe had what line could I have put in there for Barry to maybe like give him a little bit more grounding as a character, or whatever the thing was. And for me as a creator, especially if I'm watching a bad movie, that's what I'll do to entertain myself, to be able, what would I do differently? Who am I? Why would I, so what would I do? And I think that you have, unfortunately, a lot of people who just look at it and go, it stunk. Okay. Why did it stink? It was just bad.
I look at it.
Why was it bad? It was bad. It was horrible. But why was it horrible? And they can't, you know what I mean? They can't come to the next level of the critique.
See, this is so interesting. This is why I'm not a creator.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it and say, cool, the movie is whatever. I get that there's problems,
Mm-hmm.
but then I go and say, cool, did it make money?
Yeah.
And so because I don't see this is why I think this way.
Right? Yeah. It's two sides. We're two sides of the coin here. We're two sides of the coin. I am artistically, was it a success? You know what I mean? And did it make money? And that's the business, right? That's the business. That's so funny. I'm sorry. Keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
And the reason why I say this is that I look at Fast X. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed Fast X because I just enjoyed the ridiculousness of it. I thought it was a crazy movie. I put it on the background while I was doing something else. Mm-hmm. I rented it. I paid a good amount of money, and it was well worth the $20 that I paid for it. Well worth it. Sure. Absolutely. I thought it was an absolutely bad movie where there was no story, and they went to the wall and back and then 14 times over. Yeah. I mean, the fact that they could just teleport anywhere they want to, and they're in Antarctica doing some crazy stuff in Fast X. Sorry for ruining it for everybody. It's been out long enough. I didn't ruin the good parts though. But the dam scene was great. That was worth the $20 all.
The dance scene? Oh no. I will tell you, I've never seen a Fast and Furious movie.
You don't know what you're missing.
You're right that I do. No, you know what sold me on that? I'm probably never going to see one. Have you ever been to Universal in Florida?
I have not.
They have the Fast and Furious ride, and we went on it because we were in Universal, and it was raining, so we went into. It's an indoor ride, and they have a lot of the indoor track rides. You know what I mean? Where you just kind of go in and there's a screen, and you're looking at the screen. So it's going through. The story is, I guess, we're on a bus. And we're trying to get the bus to a place, but all the racers try to stop, the bad guy racers try to stop us, I guess, was the story. So explosion, car, people screaming things at you. They had Vin Diesel come in near the end it was the big climax of the ride. Vin Diesel comes in on a helicopter holding the legs of the helicopter, and he just swings in. Hey, everybody, you got to get to the place or we're not going to be able to do the thing. I'll meet you there. And then flies out, flies out of the screen. And I'm like looking around, like looking for other people, and other people are enthralled. And I'm like, what did we just? He just flew in holding onto a helicopter, talked to us like he was offering us a scone, and then flew out holding on to the helicopter. I'm like, I got it. I understand these movies. I understand the appeal. Let's keep moving forward.
No, the whole point is that it made money, and I'm like, I know
Yeah.
exactly why it made money, because it's absolutely ridiculous and it's a complete distraction.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't think it was a bad movie. I thought it did what I wanted it to do. And
Yeah.
that's the problem, is that it entertained me for 2 hours. And I'm like, and that's what I respond back to people. I'm like, did it entertain you for 2 hours? Did it take you away from whatever was going on in your life? Does your leg hurt? If your leg hurts, you went into that movie and your leg's now not hurting for 2 hours, then it did its job.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the problem, is that like, and that's how I look at the flesh. I'm like, but I also come to the conclusion saying, just because something is commercially successful doesn't mean it's good.
Oh,
I
yeah.
come to that conclusion. I think that's a big problem in our society. I really do, is that just because something made a lot of money doesn't mean it's good.
Oh yeah.
Just because something made no money doesn't mean that it's bad.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. How many of those movies have flopped? And we look at it now. Like, I'll give you an example. Shawshank Redemption flopped, and now, you know, retrospectively, it's celebrated as one of the greatest movies ever made. As well it should be, because it's a great movie.
I'll throw a TV show, Freaks and Geeks. Freaks and
Yeah.
Geeks, great show. What did
Yeah.
it do? It launched what? Jason Segel's career, James Franco's, Seth shoot Rogen's career,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't know who did. There's a few others that were in that.
There is Cardellini, who plays in Avengers Hawkeye's wife. Real cute. Cardellini, I can't remember her first name, but she's in it. Who played Velma in the Scooby-Doo movies, the live-action Scooby-Doo movies?
Yeah, there's all these people, and then there's a guy from I can't think of his name, but like, it's so interesting. But that show got no attention, and people love that show. And there you go, and it's very much highly praised. Yeah. So there you go. It's a problem, but it is what it is. But I think you should try the Fast and Furious movies.
Sure, I'll eventually get to them. There's a bunch of series that I've never seen that I'm always like, I should probably give that a shot. I'll eventually do it. I'll give you another one. You're gonna hate me. I might lose some viewers on this one. I've never seen any of the Matrix movies.
The first one was good. I enjoyed the first one.
Yeah.
The second one was okay.
Yeah.
The third one is
diminishing returns.
Yeah, and then the fourth one, you lose me. But Speed Racer was great.
Oh yeah,
by the Wachowski family.
Yeah. I remember that live action. I remember it got bogged down with something. There was something going on when they put it out that bogged it down in the theater. I don't remember what.
It was not appreciated for what they did.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, it was groundbreaking, and it is arguably one of the best movies, I think, of 2008, I want to say.
Yeah.
In retrospect, it's a shame, because what they did on the graphics is that they made that movie look like it was Speed Racer.
Nice.
And that's a skill, and those two individuals are beyond gifted for that. But Sense8 was something else. That is not a show that we can talk about very publicly, because that show is trippy as fuck.
Sense8, that's on Netflix, right?
Yeah. Oh my god,
I've seen that one, and I think I've looked past, or like I've clicked it on and go, this looks interesting, and then it just never happened. So I'll definitely give that one a shot.
Yeah, I think that show cost Netflix like $200 million.
Oh really? Wow.
For like, I think like 20 episodes.
No.
Which is ludicrous. It's an expensive show to produce. Brilliant show. Brilliant. They could have gone on for another 2 seasons.
That's another thing that's happening too, is they're throwing all this money in this content, and you never know if you're going to get a season 2. You know what I mean? Like they make all the episodes, which I like the fact that they drop all full seasons at once. I really do like that. I think that's probably the future of broadcasting, or however you want to put it. But to be able to do that, I think is something that's um, easier for the people to be able to consume that content. But the thing is, I think it's hurting storytelling on some level, because their storytelling on some level, because they always go into it knowing, I don't know if I'm going to get a season 2, so let's wrap this up. And then if they get a season 2, okay, we wrapped it up. What do we do? Which is a good, as a writer, is a good uh, test, I guess, or exercise, to be able to say, okay, how do we take it from where we ended and move it to the next level? But for me, that's something that my wife and I'll give the TV show Timeless. Did you ever watch the TV show Timeless?
I don't.
It's a good one. It's on Hulu, I believe, and it only lasted, I think it was a season, and then they gave it a very short second season. Like it had to, and the season 1 was short also. It was like 12 12 episodes,
And then did
and
what,
then
like 6?
6 episodes for season 2, and then they did like an hour and a half movie to wrap it all up. So, or something to that effect. There was a movie at the end to wrap it all up, and I think they kind of stuffed the movie. My wife and I were looking for it because we really enjoyed the show. Stuffed the movie in like on a Friday night somewhere, to where if people wanted to watch it, they could, but it wasn't going to take up like prime time, hours for them or anything. But that's another thing that is new, totally new now. If in the 80s, if a show got canceled and people were watching it, they would never make an hour and a half movie to wrap up the storylines. You would just be out of luck.
It's kind of like, I forget what show it is, where the plane goes missing, then it comes back 5 years. But
Oh yeah,
Netflix picked it up, and
yeah.
then they're finishing that off, which is also nice. But that show is trippy too.
Yeah, my wife watched that one. I saw a few episodes and I liked it, but I was watching so many other things. I was like, I can't do another thing. I want to say it was not Turbulence.
Oh man, it
It's
was
gonna
like
drive me nuts that I can't remember it. Well,
Flight something, I think it
yeah.
was. A great show. I watched like the first season. I'm like, man, this is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went into like 20 directions too, and then I'm like, okay, it's now getting lost. It's
Yeah.
Lost all over again, which was great. Lost was great. The last
Yeah.
season of Lost was rough, but beyond that, the first 5 seasons of Lost, that was fantastic.
That's a good like example of know where you're going. Know what the end game is. Like if you have to do it in 2 seasons, or you get to do it for 8 seasons, know the end game. Know what the smoke monster is. Know where they are. Know why they're on that island. You know who was really good at it is the creators of How I Met Your Mother. Like if you hear a little bit more about that show, they had an end in season 2. And they're like, well, if we only get 3 seasons, now season 3, this will be the end. This will be the mother. And then season 4, okay, if we only get 4 seasons, this will be the mother. They always had an end game for how many seasons that they had, which I think is amazing. For a forethought to be able to say, okay, if we only get 4 seasons of this, where are we going to end? If this is the last season, this is the plan. But we know what would happen in season 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20. And I think that's a credit to them, that they had an ending to be able to give the fans an ending. It might not have been the one they thought it was going to be, but to be able to have that end game is important. And I think that's where they lost it on Lost, is they didn't have an end game. They didn't know where they were going. While it was fun getting there, the ending was a little
I enjoyed Lost. I
Yeah.
enjoyed season 2. I thought season 2 was better than season 1.
Mhm.
With the other
Yeah, a lot of great stuff. Yeah.
I thought that was great. I thought there was a lot of stuff. The show that had a really good ending was Oz on HBO.
Oh yeah.
That was great. That was great.
Mhm.
Season 6 was fantastic because a lot of loose ends got tied up, but a lot of other stuff did not.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really interesting because I think they knew where they were going. I really did. And it was brilliant show in so many ways. So many things in that show were great. But I digress on all this. But yeah, I think that's a problem with comics, is that people don't know when to call quits. Go create
or when to start, or when to, okay, now it's time to make that book. I've been talking about it for 10 years. Now it's time to make that book. Yeah, make it. Go for it.
Yeah, I've been talking about mine for like at least 5.
You got it, man. You got this. Go for it.
Eventually, I'm waiting probably till August or September. I mean, I'm writing it. It's just a matter
Sure.
of funding it, which is
Sure.
a different entity
Hmm.
together. But writing maybe 2 or 3 pages a week,
Hmm.
just slowly going at it, and all you need is the first issue, and then that'll be good. But
Yeah.
it's gonna be a cool one. It's gonna be a cool one.
Awesome.
Um, but I digress because I do want to talk about one more thing before we get out of here, and that is your other project that's big, which is Layton Lightspeed.
Hmm.
And I don't know much about this. And so, what's the basic premise? Because I know it's a 100 pager.
Yeah, so I got this idea because we were talking about society. When I say we, my brothers and sisters and I and our mom, we go to family vacations every year, and I was sitting around with my brothers and sisters, and sometimes we're enjoying ourselves, and we get into some deep, heavy, conversations, and we were talking about. Um, a couple things at once. We were kind of talking about how society is afraid of their mortality. Like we as a society are afraid of our mortality, and how we don't give enough credence to growing old, of being older, of being mature. We have too many people who are trying to continue to live like they're 18 years old when they're in their 50s. I might be one of them, but I digress on that one. We're too consumed with youth to be able to really appreciate what older generations have to offer. While the youth is the future, 100%, there's still this fear of growing old, this fear of mortality, this fear of death. So I was having this conversation with my brothers and sisters, and we're all throwing out to different ideas, and all this stuff, and I see my little brother. I say my little brother, but he's 38. I see my little brother's kid jumping in and out of the pool, and this kid is hilarious. This kid is skinniest kid you'll ever meet. Hair like flinging all over the place, and he's just screaming. And he's got a water gun, and he's rah! I'm like, that kid is a comic book. That kid is a character. So I started, thinking as we're talking about this stuff in society. I started thinking about the idea of how do you capture that kid in a bottle? How do you keep him where he is now forever? And then my first thought was cloning, and some kind of rejuvenation thing that people do with all the Botox and all the whatever. So my idea was creating this concept for Latent Lightspeed was really about how society is afraid of death, how we as society have all these constructed things around what happened when we die. But even if you believe those things, you are scared of death, right? Does that make sense? So having this fear of death was something that I really wanted to kind of wrap a story around. It was morality linked to our mortality. Because this might be the only one we get, the only life we get, how does that link with our morality? Does it at all? So the basic idea is space opera, so, space aliens and spaceships and all this stuff going on, cool space fight scenes and all that stuff. But the underpinning story is about a man and his daughter who is afraid of death, and the lengths he goes to be able to not die. And the lengths he goes to be able to, in the process of mourning his wife, his daughter's mother that they had lost, and how they use this technology to be able to cheat death. And I think that the main villain of the story is really very, for me, topical. It's the main villain is the society that we're introduced to is just getting over a plague. So this character is a scientist, Leighton Lightspeed. He's a doctor. He's a scientist. Was one of the people that were in charge of coming in with the vaccine. So the vaccine, we open up on this character being ridiculed and really attacked by some people who um, didn't want to take the vaccine, but were mad that the vaccine that they didn't take worked, but it didn't work for them because they didn't take it. So it's that societal, like, link of, I don't trust it, but I'm going to be mad if other people take it and it works. Does that make sense? So it really does have like that topical idea of what we've been dealing with lately, with a lack of trust in science, to be able to know that while it is not perfect, people are working every day to improve our lives, with not just medicines, but with the ability for us to sit here and talk to each other now, states away from each other. And to be able to, how does that link with that distrust, link with how we view ourselves as human beings and how we view life in general? Right? Does that make sense? So it's the story is I think really fun, and I think it has a lot of adventure, has a lot of laughs, but also has a real like weight to it, to be able to talk about morality and be able to talk about being okay with our mortality. I think that's something we don't do well as a society. We don't handle death well.
That's good
As
thing
someone
you
who,
use
yeah,
RFP.
someone who's had to deal with it in the past, we don't handle it very well as a society, and that was something that I wanted to kind of weave a story around. And I think I've done a good job. I think I have something that has a lot of heart, but also has a lot of action and adventure. Also has a lot of humor in it. So I'm excited. I've got about 20 pages already inked. My plan is to have it out before I go back to school. I'm a teacher. Go back to school in September, and I think it's going to be good. I hope people like it.
No, it's interesting, and obviously death is a very
Mm-hmm.
interesting
Mm-hmm.
topic, and
Yeah, you don't
one of
think
my
action adventure when you think about about mortality, but there is an end game. There's an overpinning theme that I have, but I think it's a really fun story that I think people will like.
Yeah, no, I think one of my favorite quotes is Gary V is "You're gonna die. Do something about it."
Yeah, yeah,
And what that quote for those, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can interpret it, but what he's saying and the way I view it is that, look, the end game of life is simple.
yeah.
You're born and you die. I mean,
That's it.
there's a start and a finish to
Mhm.
everybody. Nobody knows when, but everything in between is you can do something about that.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's a very inspirational quote.
Hmm.
When I look at it, and it's going to be an interesting book.
Yeah.
Is all I'm going to say on that.
Yeah, I'm super excited. The art's coming out really good. I've the script is done, but it's one of those things where you're constantly like, when I'm drawing it, I've got the script in front of me. I go, oh, I need to do that, and I start plotting in where this can go into. So I would say that the first 25 pages of the script kind of ended up being about 28 to 29 pages of the first book, because you find ways to expand, ways to be able to either visually expand the story or the story itself, through the dialogue, to be able to give these characters just a little bit more humanity. And I think it's gonna be really good. I'm super excited about it. I can't wait.
Well, I don't want to push too much into it.
Mhm.
Obviously, I want people to read it. 100 pager. It's pretty much a
Mhm.
more than a mini graphic novel, but not a full graphic novel.
Mhm.
It's somewhere healthy in the middle.
Sure.
It's definitely more of a graphic novel at that
Mhm.
point,
Yeah.
versus a comic. I feel, but that's just those
Mhm.
are subjective terms, and in
Sure.
a lot of ways. But it's a big book is the
Mhm.
point versus a 24 floppy.
Mhm.
But I'm not going to push too hard into all this. Obviously, 100 pages is different. And I don't know, is this a one shot or is it going to be a continuum?
Um, always have more story, so I do have more ideas for these characters, and you always want to end with a little hint of,
You,
hmm,
you get what
hmm,
I'm asking, though, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
Maybe
not
the
going to be like you're not going to do this where 100 pages every year and you're going to have 25 of them. Do
no,
another
no, no,
offspring.
no. This story will end with I think I have a really fun ending to where it's concluded, but a little like a little let's move in this direction for a second and see what happens, just to and if it picks up, if the readers really like it, I know exactly where I want to go.
You have a back door,
Exactly.
essentially.
Exactly.
The reason why I ask is that it's very important, I think, when readers pick something up is, hey, is this really a standalone or is this a
Hmm.
continuum? Because
Hmm.
that changes the way people consume and buy
Yeah.
and invest. And I think it's very important for people who are interested to say, cool, I
Hmm.
get that, this could be a continuum, but it's not going to be like The
Yeah.
Offspring.
No,
Or it's not gonna, yeah.
it's 100 plus pages, and it's a full from beginning to end story that I think the ending is very poignant, and very touching, and it has a lot of heart, and it gives these characters closure on the issues that they're dealing with.
Fair enough. Again, I'm not going to push too much further into this because obviously it's still in production, and your goal is to get it out before you go back to school or around that time. But I do want to give you a chance to self-promote yourself because we've been speaking for an hour, 15 minutes, give or take.
Oh, wow.
And so obviously a lot of stuff's going on, and you got a lot of stuff. Obviously, you have some time off, which means you're working on your comic stuff. So where can people bother you, find you, hit you up, get the Offspring, get all that fun stuff? If you go or potentially send you a place where you go watch Fast and Furious.
You talked me into it. I'm gonna go watch it right after this. All 9, 10 of them.
There's 10 of them, and then there's the spin-off. There's the spin-off.
Oh,
but you only need to watch the first one, the second, the third, and the fourth.
That is quite the commitment.
And the fourth, you'll be fine.
Okay.
After 5, it goes downhill. Okay. You should just stop at 1. 1 is great. Okay. 2 is okay. 3 is great because it's Tokyo Drift. Sure. And then when you start going to 4, it starts going a little bit downhill. Okay. 5 is where it peaked, and then after 6, you're screwed.
Okay. All right. I'll give it a shot.
You could watch technically 10 first, and then go back to 1, and then watch the whole thing like a flashback. It's kind of like with Star Wars, right? Where if you watch, I think, what is it? You watch 5, and then you watch the other 4 as a flashback, and then you watch 6, and then it's like the Vader, machete version.
Okay.
Of Star Wars, which I think is the greatest way how to watch Star Wars, is you watch 5 first, and then you watch the other 4 as a flashback. This way you get to see Vader like kill everybody, but he's Vader. Oh, it's great. He's Vader. Sorry, guys, spoiler.
Not bad.
But anyway, you can promote yourself.
Yeah, you can find all of my work on correcthandedcomics.com. I always have something new on there. You can find me, give me likes and follows on Facebook at correcthandedcomics. Instagram is correct_handed. Twitter, correct_handed. LinkedIn, I always get a lot of cool stuff on LinkedIn. You can find me on my real name, David Whalen. And then TikTok, I always love putting out fun TikToks and fun reels. You can find it at Correct Handed. Really, any social media, if you type in Correct Handed Comics, I'll pop up. But Andrew, I wanted to give your viewers a special bonus treat. So if any of your viewers find me on either my Facebook page at Correct Handed Comics, or any social media, or my website, correcthandedcomics.com, and you message me with their email address, I will send them a free PDF copy of one of our 100+ page, one of our 24-page one-shots. So your viewers and your viewers alone can get a free digital copy of one of my one-shots. And I won't tell you which one. It'll be a surprise.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm sure my viewers will appreciate that.
I hope so.
Because I like a bunch of your one-shots, and I've read a bunch of them. I don't think I've read all of them, but I know the sock puppet is good.
Sock hop killer, yeah.
That's a good something one. Else. That's something else, and it makes you question when you put on your socks.
What's funny is I was on a podcast with some guys from across the pond. They were in England, and their first question was, "What's a sock hop?" And so I had to take 2 or 3 minutes to explain what a sock hop was, which was really fun. It was like, okay, how do I? So it's the 1950s, and the teenagers, which were just starting to come into in society, being able to have money and be able to spend money, and they weren't considered kids anymore. They would go to dances. They would take off their shoes and they would hop around in their socks. So a dance was called a sock hop, and they're like, oh, why not just call it a dance? I was like, oh, I don't know, because it's not as fun, I guess. I don't know.
It's too much. It's too much. But enough about that. I mean, we're gonna get me and you in trouble.
Nope.
This way, and we're gonna get us canceled here. Preferably by people over the ocean, across the pond, if you will. And I don't want that. I don't want that today. I can do that plenty by myself. But I do want to make it crystal clear that you need to promote and you need to support what you love, because in order for that to get made, you need to economically support it. And what that means is that if projects are readily available to you on websites, Shopify stores, other venues, other Kickstarters, comic shops, wherever you may buy your comics, you need to support them and buy them there, because that does help to get things made, if that makes any sense. As well as you need to follow people on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever else they are on social media. Email lists are a big deal as well. You need to follow people and subscribe to those, because that does help tremendously, as well as share out what they push out, because that does help too. And as far as I'm concerned about me, obviously I appreciate when people follow me on social media at Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I do have a Redbubble t-shirt up there that you can pick up. It's very cool, available in 16 different colors, making fun of Gundam, Taco Bell, most interesting man in the world. If you would like to buy that, you are more than welcome to. You can pick your colors. You can put it on a mini skirt. I'm an equal offender for all people. I fought hard for that, guys. I fought hard for that. So if anybody would like to do that, it's very, very cute, and it's very mini. I fought hard for it. Yes, I did. There were many negotiations that happened on Redbubble for that. But I digress. As well as I buy me a coffee, and well, you could go bother me on any social media, because I truly appreciate when people bother me on social media. As well as you could subscribe on YouTube at Pop Anime Comics. Beyond that, I don't have anything else to promote. And on that note, I will give you the final word.
Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate you having me on again, and I appreciate all your viewers. Like you said, give me a like, follow on all the social media, and you can find me at correcthandedcomics.com. Don't get left out.
I don't think I could have said that any better myself, everybody. And that is a wrap.